today everybody might find out, but I said, then, yeah, now that's it. Now what I say can be used against me. That's right. That's right. Rav Papa Asik Leila Barei Abu Surah. Rav Papa married Abu Surah's daughter, but his wife had a younger sister, and Rav Papa had a son. And Rav Papa wanted to, he must have liked his shver because he was willing to take his shver as a mechitn, because he now wanted to allow his son to marry his wife's younger sister. Also, they were going to do those financial negotiations. You know, Shmuel, the first time. No, yes, it's his mother's sister. Yeah, but you ought to marry your mother's sister. Yeah. So the problem here is every time you have to do negotiation with shidduchim, you always call your friends. Okay, the mechatanim are coming over. What should I say? How do I do that? How do I deal with this? So the Gemara is telling you how to deal with this. Shama Yehuda bar Meremer. Yehuda bar Meremer heard that Rav Papa was coming to town. Nafak also, he went out to greet him. He met him, but Kimata Lepischa, when they got to the Shver's house, to Abu Surah's house, Hava Kamifta Minei. Rav Yehuda said, Rav Papa, I gotta go. I got an appointment. I can't come with you. Amar Lei, Rav Papa told Yehuda, Neil bar Mar Badoy, come with me. I wouldn't mind having support in negotiation. This way it'll be 2 against 1, and I'll be able to squeeze more money out of my mechitn. He saw, Papa saw, that Rabbi Yehuda had no interest in being part of this negotiation. What is your concern about being involved in this negotiation where we're going to be extracting money from my mechitn? Mishum da Amalei Shmuel Rabbi Yehuda. Is it because of Shmuel told Rabbi Yehuda, Shinina, sharp one, Loi Sahave Bavura Achsanta. You should never be involved in a situation where someone is changing the halachas of Yerusha. Someone's trying to circumvent, someone's trying to modify what the Torah wants. In other words, the Torah wants it to go to the sons. And by negotiating a Natan, you're forcing somebody to give his money to his daughters. Don't be involved in such a thing. Even if a person has a good son and a bad son, even there you shouldn't be involved in getting the Yerusha to go to the better son. You know why? Who knows what's going to come out of even the son that's not so great? Maybe something great will come of him. So don't be involved in playing around with Yerusha. The Torah said how things should be. The Torah gave a prescription. Leave it that way. The kol shgein mibra lebart. And surely you shouldn't be involved in the scenario where you're diverting Yerusha from a son to a daughter, and when you're negotiating on that, that's precisely what you're doing. You're forcing the girl's father to divert his assets from the son to his daughter. So Papa told me, don't be worried about that. You know why? Because Hainami takanta de rabbanim. Because it's takanta de rabbanim also that Nadin should be given. Amar Lei. In other words, Rabbi Yochanan told us on Amud Beis, so that the reason why we do it is because the Torah says you have to induce boys to marry your daughter, and part of that is putting down an apple. So Rabbi Yehuda told Rav Papa, sure, a man should willingly give Natan to his daughter, but to force him, to squeeze him, you want me there to pressure him, to pressure Abu Surah. That it doesn't say. It says a person on his own should offer Natan for his daughter. But that you should come and ask and squeeze for Natan, it doesn't say that. So that's point number one. If you're sitting and negotiating with a mechutton and he tells you have to give Natan, you show him from the Gemara. The Gemara says you're not allowed to ask for Natan. The Gemara says the father should give Natan. But Lasuya is inappropriate. That's what the Gemara says. Omer Lei, Atu mi kamina loch, the oil of Asya. Rapala told him, I don't want you to say anything and to squeeze Abu Surah. Come, but don't pressure him. I just want you to be there. Your presence alone is what I would want. Omer Lei, Rabbi Yehuda said, that's exactly my problem. If I'm just sitting there, my mere presence will pressure your mechutton into giving more than he might have wanted to, and that's inappropriate. Achvaya, but Rav Papa didn't let Rabbi Yehuda go. He forced him, Rashi says, of course, with the words. He was convincing. Well, and he came to these negotiations. So let's stop for one moment. So when the Mechitten tells you have to give Natan, you could say, Mechitten, I heard you're a big Talmid Chacham, you have a very chashuv son, but I don't know, you're missing the Gemara Kesubos. The Gemara Kesubos says that I'm supposed to give Natan, but you're not supposed to ask. You're not supposed to pressure. So that's your first line of defense, if the Mechitten starts to pressure you. Now, there's a very interesting point we learned over here. We learned that a person should never divert his Yerusha from a bad son to a good son. Well, isn't that exactly what Avraham Avinu did? Didn't he write a shtar matana so that all of his assets would be given over to Yitzchak? Isn't that what Eliezer presented to Besuel? Here's a shtar that my Avraham Avinu gave over all of his assets to Yitzchak. What about Yishmael? So that's kasha number one. So there's a lot of different roots offered about it. One is that Yishmael was not the son of Avraham's wife. It was the son of Avraham's Pilegesh, of Keturah. And as a matter of fact, there's a famous Rashi that people say acute vord on. It says all the way at the end, I believe, of Parshas Toldos, it says that Rivka sent Yaakov to Lavan's household. And it said, he sent her to Lavan, Rivka, the brother of Rivka, aim Yaakov ve'esav. That's what it says there. So Rashi's comment on that pasuk, why does it have to say to Rivka, the mother of Yaakov and Esav? We know Rivka is the mother of Yaakov and Esav. So Rashi says right there, Ein li yodea ma bo zeh l'lamdeinu. I don't know what information the Torah is trying to tell us when the Torah is telling us that this is Ein Yaakov and Esav. But the main point is that the main point that people say is Yitzchak was unable to write over all of his nechosim to Yaakov because Rivka was Ein Yaakov Esav. By Sarah, where she was not the mother of Yishmael, Hagar was, there Avram was able to write over all of his assets to Yitzchak. But Yitzchak couldn't write over all of his assets to Yaakov because Yaakov had a real brother because it was Ein Yaakov Esav. That's one pshat they say. Another pshat that they say is, it says, Ki Yitzchak yikar l'chazara. Avram had a nevuah that Yitzchak was going to be the child, not Yishmael. So it could be that's why he felt justified writing over all of the nechosim to Yitzchak rather than Yishmael. And the third reason is because the Rebbeinu Shalom told Avram Avinu, Kol asher tomer Sarah shema b'koila. Sarah was a neviah, and Sarah said, Ki lo yirish Yishmael and B'niyim Yitzchak. So Sarah said, you got to cut him out. So maybe the Gemara says, why shouldn't you be Mavi Yerusha? Because who knows, even if you have a bad child, maybe that bad child will eventually have a good child, and therefore you shouldn't cut him out of the Yerusha. But here, Sarah and Imenu with her Nevius saw that nothing good will come out of Yishmael, and therefore it was justified that the Yerusha should be diverted away from Yishmael to Yitzchak, and Avraham knew that he should listen to Sarah because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him. Those are the different stories. Halacha l'maisa, the Polish can paskin that someone who's done not such a erlich yitzay mitzvahs, you're of course not allowed to divert Yerusha away from him because he'll have good children. Who knows? But if someone's a mechal Shabbos b'fehesha or he's a more lahachis, such a person will not have good children, and therefore there's halachic support not to give such a person any Yerusha. And of course, this is something one would have to discuss. The Paisik Rechman, some people shouldn't have such children. Zok to more about it. Could be he did, but at that point, yeah, but if at that point, okay. Zok to Gemara. Ishtik. So Ishtik v'Yosef. Rabbi Yehuda came along, but he didn't open his mouth. During these negotiations, Abu Sirah sees that Rabbi Yehuda is not saying anything. He thought maybe that Rabbi Yehuda is angry. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda is angry because he feels I'm being cheap. He feels I'm not giving enough for Nadin. So what he did was Abu Sirah, because he felt this pressure, is Kosrei L'chol Mai Havalei. He wrote over whatever he owned, he wrote over to the couple. L'soif Amerlei. At the end, he said, because again, Rabbi Yehuda said, I'm not saying a word, I don't want to get involved. But Abu Sirah misunderstood Rabbi Yehuda not talking as a lack of as a being upset. So he said, Hashtanami loy mishtoi mar. You're still not talking? As if you're upset, you don't like what I'm giving? Chayidamar, I swear, loy shvigi midi l'navshoi. I haven't kept any for myself. I've given everything away, and you're still not happy? So Rabbi Yehuda saw that his silence actually had the opposite effect. That added more pressure. So Amr Lei, Rabbi Yehuda said, Imi noi didi, if you would ask me, afilu hai nami de kasavta l'nichli. I wouldn't have even given what you offered originally. I think you overpaid. Amr Lei, so Abu Sirah just saw that he got taken. So he said, Hashtanami had to be. Maybe I should retract my commitment. Amr Lei, that much Rabbi Yehuda said, Shavi nafshech. I said you shouldn't give. Hadrana loy kamin. But to reverse a commitment that you made, that I couldn't possibly support. So at the end of the day, Abu Sirah overpaid. The question here is, we just learned on Lamed Beis, a halacha, that you're supposed to give up to a tenth, not more than a tenth. So how is Abu Sirah able to give more than a tenth of his value? So the teretz they say is, maybe Abu Sirah was not Shatz Talmud Chacham, and maybe he didn't know. But the question is, how did Rav Papa accept it if it was more than 1/10? The teretz is, maybe Rav Papa didn't know how much Abu Sirah had. So therefore, he didn't know if it was 10% or not. What's unusual is Abu Sirah was Rav Papa's father-in-law. Is it likely that Rav Papa didn't know how much money his father-in-law had? Maybe he didn't. Maybe things were different in those days where not everybody knew everything about each other. And he couldn't just search his Shver's net worth on the internet. So I once had a negotiation with a Mechutin, and Shmuel said over a story where the Mechutin says, do you have anything more to give? And he said, no, and the negotiation was over. But I had a Nudnik who held me on the phone for 45 minutes pressuring, which was absurd. And he was telling me, the Gemara Kesubos Daf Nun Gimel says that you have to give Nabi. So I said, listen, what I'm telling you I'm giving is because I know I can give this, I have this. What you want me to give you, I don't have. So I can't promise you that I'm going to give you something that I don't have. If whatever money I have, I can say this is what I'm going to give. But money that I don't have, that if I have it, I'm going to give it. I might be lying. I don't want to make such a promise. So he tells me, no, you should do it anyway. So I told him, I think you're making a mistake. I said, because if you look at the Gemara Kesubos, the Gemara Kesubos says you can promise everything that you have. It didn't say that Abu Sirah promised over and above what he had, and I'll give you for my future earnings. You see that when it comes to Nadin, the only commitment you're supposed to make is what you have. There's no such thing as ongoing support based on what I'm going to earn later. There's no makar to that in the Gemara whatsoever. The makar to Nadin in the Gemara is if you have, you give. But if you don't have, you don't give. Where do you see, I told him, where do you see in the Gemara a commitment to give what you don't have without limit? That's the husband to the wife. We learned yesterday, mezainos are unashir. It's unrestricted, even ongoing with no limit. Davar she'ein lakitzvah. So davar she'ein lakitzvah, I told Bechidin, that's what you should be promising to me. If you want to come with the Gemara, at least know your facts. The Gemara says the davar she'ein lakitzvah is what the boy has to be mechayiv the girl. What the girl has to be mechayiv the boy is only from what he has. So how do you have the chutzpah to ask me to give you what I don't have? The Gemara, and to tell me it's the Gemara says you're supposed to give what you don't have. You have to give it to me, not me to you. And with that, didn't work out too well. But that was but at the end of the day, he wasn't asking to the Shidduch. I said no, because I told the guy, if you're crazy enough to happen to trying for 45 minutes on the phone, then I'm not interested. I tell you what my offer is. Take it or leave it. Don't pressure me. Anyway, that was the end of that story. So that was the story that happened when Rav Papa was negotiating with the Shver for his son Shidduch. What would happen if Machra Kesubos Alabai? A woman sold her ksuba to her husband. She told her husband that if I die first, you don't have to pay me off at all. You get your yashim anyway. But if you die first, I'm willing to sell you that schus, that even if you die first, if you divorce me, you won't have to pay me. So the question is, yesh la ksubas b'nindichrin. What if she dies and then he dies? Do the Tanai ksuba b'nindichrin still apply? Or ein la ksubas b'nindichrin? Or maybe not. Amalei Rava, so Rava asked, that's a very uncommon case. A woman should sell her husband her ksuba. If anything, you should have asked the shaila of a case that's so much more common. Why didn't you ask me a shaila what's the halacha if she is moichel or ksuba? That's something that might be more common. Omar lei. So Rabbi Yemar said, Hashta mecheres kamiboyli. I'm asking my cheresh. You know why? Because you think Zokrashi, you think that there's more of a svara to say that it should be a good mechira rather than a mechila. You know why? Because by a mechira, at least I'm getting something for it. He's paying me cash. So there, I'm willing to give up my ksuba. But moichel is less of a chance. Zok Rabbi Yemar, it's exactly the opposite. My cheresh kamiboyli. The Abba Gav, the Ikal Meimer, Zuzay and Tsua. Why would she sell her ksuba? Not because she wants to. It's because she must be in a very difficult, tight situation, and she's desperate for cash. Therefore, the Amina commanded kamachula mea uchli ba'uchla. It's like they're beating her with a strap with 100 sharp metal edges to it. So she's literally being forced. She doesn't really want to give up her ksuba. There, I have a shaila if it's considered giving up a ksuba. Surely, if she's willingly moichel, she doesn't care about it, and there for sure, you would argue that the ksuba spun indifferent, she's moichel as well. So, Zok Rabbi Yemar, if we consider that she gave up the ksuba spun indifferent when she sells the ksuba, we surely would consider it like she gave up the ksuba spun indifferent if she's being moichel ksuba. So, Amar Rava commented about this sugi as well. Pshitali, there's no doubt in my mind. If she doesn't sell the ksuba to her husband, she sells it to a third party. So let's think about what she's actually selling. If she dies first, then the person who she sold it to gets nothing at all. He's taking a gamble. But if he dies first, or if he divorces her, then the person that she sold her ksuba to will claim whatever she would have claimed. So the question is, if she did that, and then she died, and then he died, yesh la ksubas b'nindichron. There for sure is ksubas b'nindichron there. My timer. Why is that? Because zuzay and tsua. She only sold what she sold because she was forced, but she definitely wouldn't have given up the ksubas b'nindichron. She definitely still wants her child to get whatever her nadin was brought in. But moichelas ksuba levaila, if she's moichel ksuba, there ain't ksubas b'nindichron. There for sure, I agree that there's no ksubas b'nindichron. My taima achulu yachilta. She was moichelet, and Rashi says v'nekal beinah lahafsid b'nah muksubas achina. She's happy to be mafsid even her children from her rights to her ksuba because she was moichel. The question is, what if she didn't send her ksuba, sell her ksuba to a third party? She sold her ksuba to her husband. So is it kamecheres lacherem dami, and she retains the schus of the ksubas b'nindichrin, or kamechelas labayla dami, or is it like she was moichel her ksuba to her husband, and therefore she doesn't retain the ksubas b'nindichrin? So that is the shaila. Okay, Zok to Gemara. Basar the boy, after Rava had the shaila, Hadar Pasha, he came to a conclusion, and he said as follows: Moicheres ksuba labayla. If one sells a ksuba to her husband, kamoicheres lacherim dami, it's just like she sold it to somebody else, and in fact she would retain the ksubas b'nindichrin. Ma'asav aridi ba'avin, Mesa if she dies. This was a tragic story that we had in Yavamas. A woman there was an Eid that allowed a woman to get married. She married, there was an Eid that her husband died, and because of that, she remarried. And then her husband shows up alive. So now she's Teitzei Mizeh Mizeh. She has a very big problem. The halacha is that her ksuba, neither Yorshin get. Whether she had children from the first husband or whether they had children from the second husband, no one gets her ksuba. So the Gemara asks on that Mishnah, what do you mean no one gets her ksuba? There is no ksuba. She's considered a woman who is mezana tachas baila. Ba'avinaba, ksubasa maya vidita. There is no ksuba. V'amar Papa, and her Papa said, ksubas ben indichrin. The whole shaila is the ksuba ben indichrin, which means she had children with either husband. She doesn't get ksuba, she forfeits her ksuba. But when her husband dies, we don't say that her children have rights to her ksuba. Even that she forfeits. In other words, not only does she get a knas, but her children also suffer for a misdeed which she did. They lose their ksuba. But the problem is, we just said a halacha. Rava just said that if she's forced, and Rabbi Yemer said it as well, if she's forced to sell, she sells her ksuba to somebody else, that's like she's forced. It's like she's being whipped. She's desperate for the money. And therefore we say that she's not giving up her ksuba. In other words, a woman who's in a forced situation does not forfeit the ksuba. So if that's the case, here where a woman remarried improperly, why do we say that she loses the ksuba? She's forced. She was forced. She didn't want to be alone. She was desperate, and that's why she remarried. So if where she's desperate and she sells her ksuba, we say that doesn't relinquish ksuba b'nedichrin. Why, if she's desperate and she remarries, why there she does lose the ksuba b'nedichrin? So Gemara, Hasam knasu the kansu rabbanon. There's a special knas when a woman remarried improperly, and we know that there's a rule. Since we're literally going to throw the book at her, and she'll lose everything. If in fact her husband is alive and she remarries, that's why we let her get remarried in the first place. So we actually are looking to penalize her and punish her as much as possible, even to the point that her children will lose ksubas b'nedichrin if she's wrong and her husband was actually alive. But a normal honest, like she's selling the ksuba because she's desperate for cash, that does not relinquish her rights to the ksubas b'nedichrin. Zok Gemara weiter. Yosef Ravin Bar Chanina Kamedi Rav Chisda. Ravin Bar Chanina was sitting in front of Rav Chisda. The Yosef v'ka'amar mishmei Rabbi Lazar, and they said over Allah in the name of Rabbi Lazar as follows: Moichelas ksubas alabaylo ein lo mezonos. If a woman is moichel the ksuba to her husband, then she's no longer entitled to mezonos. Amar lei. So. They told Rabbi Lazar, who was speaking. Ravin was sitting in front of Chisda. So Ravin said this halacha to Rabbi Chisda, and Rabbi Chisda responded, if you haven't told me this halacha in the name of Rabbi Lazar, who's a great man, that she gives up her rights to mezonos by being kind to her husband and being moichel l'ksuba, I would have argued to the contrary. The pasuk says, the one who pays back good with bad, bad will never leave his household. So here she was kind enough to be moichel the ksuba. She did it out of kindness to her husband. So because of that, you're going to penalize her and you're going to take away her mezonos. That's improper. So therefore, I would have disagreed with it. But since Rabbi Lazar said it, I accept. Yosef Rab Nachman v'Ula v'Avimai bar Papa. So there's a whole group of Talmidei Chachamim sitting together. Rab Nachman, Ula, Avima, bar Rav Papi, and the Yosef Rab Chia bar Ami Gabai. And Rab Chia was sitting with them as well. So this was a nice group of big Talmidei Chachamim. Also, who gavra the Shchiva Arusasai. And a man came along whose Arusa died. So he didn't make Nesuin yet, he only made Eris. She died. And the question is he mechuyev to bury her? Now we know, why does someone have to bury his wife? We learned earlier, it's tachas, the nadin that he gets. It's tachas Kesubos. We also know that if she dies before he makes nesuin on her, or if she dies before the shluchim have the baal at least have her, he doesn't get the nadin. So here you have an arusa who's not going to get the nadin. So is he mechuyev on the tit for tat? Is he mechuyev to bury her? They told him zil kvar, either bury her, or have ksubasa, or give her the ksuba of manu masai. So Rashi tells us that at this point in the Havamina, they thought that his chiyuv kvura is not only from the nadin, his chiyuv kvura also comes connected the fact that since when she dies, he no longer has to give her ksuba. A man has a chiyuv of manu masai of ksuba to his wife. If he dies first, or if he divorces her, but if she dies, now he gets that back. He gets that commitment back. So since he regained that commitment, in lieu of that, he should have to bury her. That was their comment. Amalu Rab Chia said that's absolutely incorrect, because it's not pshat that there was a commitment made that he gets back. He never owed him anu masayim if it was only a rusa. Tanina, we learned ishtar rusa, a woman who's only a rusa. If she dies, if he's a kohen, he doesn't have the halachas of an oinen. In other words, he's still mechuyev to do avoid in the Beis Hamikdash. If he's a kohen, he's not allowed to make himself tamei to bury her. Once again, because she's only an arusa. So too, she's not an oinen. She doesn't have to become tamei to him, because normally a person has to become tamei for their next of kin. Mesa, if she dies, eina yarsha, he will not yarshin her. Meis who, if he dies, then goivik ksubasa, then she gets the collector ksuba. Zok to Gemara, time of the meis who. The only reason why she gets to claim her ksuba is if he died. Hamesehi, if she dies, ain la ksuba. There is no din ksuba. In other words, since there's no din ksuba here at all, and he doesn't yarshin it from her because there was never a din ksuba in the first place, why in the world would he be mechuyev to bury her? And my timer, what's the reason why we say there's no din ksuba here at all? Rab Hoshia, she'enani karba l'cheshetinase la'acher titli mashakasav l'chi. In the ksuba it says, when you are in the situation, in the condition where you could marry somebody else, you're free to marry somebody else, then you will have payable to you the ksuba. If you die, you're not in a situation where you could be l'cheshetinase la'acher. So in fact, there was never a chiyuv to pay the manu masayim triggered. So if there's never a chiyuv triggered, the fact that I couldn't have yarshin that right from you, you never had the right in the first place. So I owe you nothing, and in fact, I don't have to pay for your kura. Kiyasa Rav and Amar Shlokish, Arusa Shemesa, and the Arusa who died, Ein la ksuba, there's no din ksuba. So basically, Rav came from Eretz Yisrael, and he said over this great chiddush that Arusa Shemesa Ein la ksuba, which we already learned here in Bavel from this brisa. So Amalu Abaye told Ravin, I don't need your chedushim. Zilu Amrulei, you can go back and tell Rish Lakish, Shkila Tivusech. You can take your great chedushim and shove it, Shari Achizri, and throw it in the thorns. We don't need it. You know why? Because we just learned how Rab Hoshia was medayik from the brisa that in fact there is no din ksuba from Erison at all. Okay, now let's go on to the ksubas being different. To the ksuba of the nukvin. The nukvin, the aval cheminoi, any daughters that are born, they will have the right to eat mezainos until they get married. That was the lashon of the Mishnah, that if there's yisoymes here, they get to live off the estate until they're married. We're going to learn now more detail about when that expires. Rav Tani ad tilacha naguvin. Rav learns exactly like it says in our Mishnah, until they're married. The Levi Tani added to Bogran, until they become mature, until they're 12 and a half. So, Frek the Gemara, Rav Avalgav the Bogar, Rav who says that they get to take mezainos until they're married. That means even if they're adults, even if they're fully mature, they get to continue taking from the estate. That's not logical. The Levi Avalgav the Insif, and Levi holds that up until she's a begeris, she gets to take, even though she was married. That's not logical either. Ella, what you have to say is, Bogar below Insit, if she became mature, even though she wasn't married, or into bugger, or if she became nesua, even though she didn't mature. The chula alma loy pligi. Both Rav and Levi agree that she can no longer claim mezainis. Where is Rav and Levi arguing? Ki pligi bi'arusa v'loy bagar. A woman who is only an arusa and not bagar. Is an arusa married enough to lose her schus mezainis? Rav says adati lachon legavron, which means Rashi says adati lachon kicha de erisin. Even if she's only an arusa, that's enough for her to lose her schus. Even though she's not a bagris. So Rav holds an arusa is enough for her to lose her mezainos. Levi says either bagris or nesur. And that's how Levi quoted a brisa, because Levi also used to do what Reb Chia did. He used to also analyze and set up and verify prices. So he had a brisa that he verified the incident. The brisa that Levi quoted said until they become matured and they reach the point where they could marry. So reach the point that they can marry means after kedushin, the husband makes a commitment. In 6 months and 12 months, I'm going to make nesuin. And at that point, when that time arrives, at that point the husband is mechuyev to feed his wife. So either until she becomes an adult, or until her husband becomes mechuyev to be mason. Take more tarti, you need both. It's not logical that you should need both. If she became an adult, even if she wasn't married, of course, she no longer gets mezainis. If her husband is mechuyev to be mefarneser, weiter she shouldn't be able to take from the estate. Ella, what does the brisa mean? Oy tabagran, oy yimtez manei linsaba. Whichever comes first releases the estate from supporting her. Either if she becomes a full adult of begeres, she's no longer entitled to mezainis, she'll have to support herself. Or if she's at the point where her husband is mechuyev to give her mezainis, she can no longer claim from the estate. Let's say this machloikis as to whether or not Erison absolves the estate of supporting a Yisoima. Let's say it's a machloikis tonight. Because the brisa says, up until what point does a Yisoima get? Pernoso, until Erison. Mishur Mabelazar Amru, Acheti Bugger, until she becomes a Boigris. Zok Gemara, Tani Rabbi Yosef. Okay, so let's stop here. So right over here, you see this machlokes. If Erison does it, like Rav says, or Rabbi Lezer says, until she's a Boigris. So there's your machlokes, Rav and Levi. Tani Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef had said a different nusach, but we need to know what he meant. He wrote Ad Diahavim. They can take mezainis until they are to men. What does that mean? Iboilu havayid the erison or havayid in the soon. What does Rabbi Yosef mean? Does he hold like Rav, who if she becomes an arusa, the estate no longer supports her, or does Rabbi Yosef say like Levi that until she's in the suah, if she's a tana, of course, until she's in the suah, she can continue to take mezainis. Teku, the Gemara doesn't know what Rabbi Yosef meant. Omer le Rabbi Chisda Rabbi Yosef. Mishemilach mined Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Chisda asked Rabbi Yosef, did you ever hear over Rabbi Yehuda's opinion about this subject? Arusa yeshla mezainos or ena mezainos? Does an arusa get mezainos? In other words, do we pass them like Rav or not? Omer le. So Rabbi Yosef said, Mishma lo shamil. I never heard Rabbi Yehuda comment specifically on this subject. Elamisara lesla. Logic dictates that once she's an arusa, even though her husband's not mechuyev to give her mezainis, still the estate should not have to give her mezainis. Why? Even the irsa, once someone makes eris into a woman, so now she is technically his wife. Even though he's not mechuyev because of his marriage contract to give her mezainis, it doesn't pass that he should let a woman who is mekadesh, a woman who's technically his wife, should go knocking on doors to raise money for her food. He won't let her be humiliated. Someone who makes kedushin to a woman will not allow her to be humiliated. So therefore, by default, he will give her food. So since by default he will give her food, the estate no longer has to support her. Amar lei, so he answered back, Reb Chisda answered back to Rabbi Yosef, I disagree with you. If you didn't hear anything from Rabbi Yehuda specifically, misvara isla, I would say to the contrary. misvara, she does get mezonos from the estate. You know why? Because I don't believe that her husband will be mefarnes her. Even like Kimla Begave, he's not sure if he's going to keep her. Remember, when he's boiler, he might find that she has certain women that will render his whole kedushin on mekatos. So he's not going to take a chance giving money to a woman, even though she's his wife, if he does not yet know if this marriage will survive. So therefore, he will not support her. And since he will not support her, her support relies on the estate. Vikad Amri, the story went exactly the opposite. Amalei Rabbi Yosef said, Mishmar Shmili, I didn't hear Beferish from Yehuda, but Misvara Isla, Misvara she should get, because he will not support her. Her husband will not support her. He will not support her because he doesn't know yet if there'll be a mekos. And Amalei and Reb Chisda took the opposite approach. She shouldn't get mezainos because we will assume that her husband, even though he's not obliged to support her, he will support her. Once he made kedushin to this woman, he won't let her roam the streets and knock on doors for money. He will support her. Siman, the Gavri, the Siman of the Manda Amrim, the Amayroyim, who we are now going to quote, are Suk Zeraf, and we're going to see Suk. Sheen of the Suk stands for Absheshes, so we're going to quote Halacha from Absheshes. Kuf stands for Rish Lakish. We're going to quote something from Rish Lakish. Zayin stands for Rabbi Lazar. We're going to quote Halacha from Rabbi Lazar. Reish stands for Rava. We're going to quote a Halacha from Rava. And Pei means we're going to quote Halacha from our Papa. And what cases are we talking about? Miana, V'yibma, Shniya, Arusa, Vansa. So these 5 cases are going to be commented on by Rab Sheshes, Rish Lakish, Rabbi Lazar, Rava, and Rab Papa. Rab Sheshes. So now we're going to deal with the first one is Rab Sheshes. Mima Enes. A woman who was Mima Enes. What does Mima Enes mean? She was married off as a Ktana. So she became a Nesua. If she became a Nesua, her husband was already responsible to support her. So if her husband's supporting her, she can no longer get Mizanis from the estate. But then she made Milah, which undid everything, and now she's back in the family again. So does she revert back to getting Mizanis? Yesh la Mizanis or Eina Mizanis. Amalu Rab Sheshes commented Tinisua. We actually have a brayso about it. It says as follows: Almana b'veisavia, an almana who's back in her father's house, meaning she was an almana mina erisin, and therefore now that her husband died, she's back in her father's house, or grusha again mina erisin b'veisavia, or shemeris yavim b'veisavia, or a woman whose husband died and they didn't have any children, so she's back in her father's house, and her husband died when she was only in Arusa. Yes, she does return back, even though she was in Arusa, she returns back into her father's household to get mezainos, because she was never in Nesua, she was only a Rusa. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, if she's still in her father's household, yesh la mezainos. Eina b'veisavia, eina mezainos. Now this seems to be exactly the same thing as a Tanakama. Correct the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Hani Tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda seems to be saying exactly word for word what the Tanakama is saying. Let's say the nafkuni is mamaenes. The Tanakama is over Islam. The Tanakama says a mamaenes does get mezainos, because what does the Tanakama say? Alman b'veisavia, grusha b'veisavia. Well, mamaenes is also b'veisavia, because now that she undid her marriage, she's back into her father's household. She gets mezainos. But Rabbi Yehuda said oida b'veisavia, meaning if she never left her father's household, mamaenes did leave her father's household. Once she leaves, she doesn't go back in. So the Gemara wants to say, Rav Sheshes wants to say that the Tanakama holds Ma'enes gets mezainos. The Tanakama is over Islay, Rabbi Yehuda is over less law. So that's the first shaila. Rav Sheshes said that a Ma'enes, a woman who was married and her husband was supporting her, then she made miyun, she goes back to the estate and she can continue to take mezainos from the estate. That's totally the machlokes, the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. Now we're on to the second. Boy Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish wanted to know, what about Bas Yavama, Yesh la Mezainos, or Ein la Mezainos? What's the halacha? A woman was married to a man, and he died without children. So what happened? Her brother-in-law married her, and then they had children. Now remember, the ksuba was never, there's no ksuba written with the second husband. The ksuba is written with the first husband. We even said that the ksuba is taken from the assets of the first husband, not from the assets of the second husband. So therefore, the daughter that she has with the second husband shouldn't be covered by the Tanai Ksuba. So even though the Tanakh ksuba says any children that we have will be able to live off the estate, that's children that we have. But children that you have with my brother after I die, the Tanakh ksuba doesn't cover that. So Rish Lakish wanted to know, would this girl be able to get mezainis? Since we know that the second husband does not have to write up a new ksuba, rather the estate of the first husband is the estate where she would collect the ksuba from, less law. So therefore, her daughter, there is no ksuba being mechayiv her second husband to support their daughter. Therefore, she would not get mezainis. The Rabban made a takana that if there are no assets left with the first brother, we still want to protect her so that he shouldn't be able to divorce her easily. So then we do force him to come up with his own ksuba money. So in certain ways, he is independently responsible for ksuba. So maybe he should also be responsible that his estate should have to be mazen the Yosema. So therefore, Isla, and that the Gemara says Teku will remain with a suffix. So we'll stop here. Maybe we could, it's actually 7:43, and you're only at 7:45, so we can learn one more Shiloh. So we did so far, out of the Simonim, we did Sak, we did Reb Sheshes, we did Rish Lakish, and I believe we just did now Rabbi Lozer, right? I think this is Rabbi Lozer. No, this is Rish Lakish. Now we're going to do Rabbi Lozer. Boy, Rabbi Lozer, Bas Shnia, Yesh lo mezonos, ein lo mezonos. What if you were married to a woman who you were not allowed to be married to? There was an Isser D'Rabbanan for you to be married to her. So normally, if you're married to a woman that's also to be married to, she doesn't get ksuba. Ksuba protects the marriage. We don't want to protect the marriage. We want to break up the marriage. So there's no ksuba. So the halacha is kivan the less lo ksuba. Since the mother is not entitled to ksuba, therefore less lo mezoni. If they have children, the children won't be entitled to mezonis. Idilma ima of the Yisura, the mother who did an Isser, she wasn't allowed to be married to this man. Kansua Rabbana. They counted her, and therefore she doesn't get ksuba after her marriage breaks up. But the daughter, she's an innocent product of an illegal marriage. What did she do wrong? She doesn't get counted that we take away her mezonius, we leave them with her, take it. So we have a couple of more lines till the next take we must do. Boy Rava, Basarusa, Yesh lo mezonius, ein lo mezonius. A man only made kedushin, not the suin, so there's no chiyuv ksuba yet. But he illegally had relations with his wife before Nisuin, and she got pregnant, and they had a daughter. So would that daughter be entitled to mezonos, even though that daughter was born before the Tanakh ksuba kicks in, because the Tanakh ksuba only kicks in by Nisuin. Even the Isla ksuba, we know that the 200, the Mona Masayim, she's entitled to. So therefore, maybe the daughter should also get mezonos. Or maybe the Rabbanan weren't masaking ksuba till Shas Nasuin, and this girl was born before Nasuin, so she's not entitled to Zionis. So Kumar Teku. So that takes us through half of the shilas of this list of shilas. We will stop here, Be'ez Hashem, and we'll be mamshech tomorrow at 6 a.m. Everyone should have a wonderful, wonderful day.